My name is Roberta Fair. I'm a former employee of Presentation Church and of the Camellia Foundation. We'd like to start the evening with a prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father in heaven, we come again at this appointed time, at this sacred hour. We thank you for life and all of life's benefits. We thank you, dear God, for a multitude of blessings. We thank you that we woke up this morning and looked around our house and things were all right. We thank you, Lord, that you enabled us to come down the dangerous highways and assemble together here now. And so we beg you now, we come before your presence, we come with thanksgiving in our hearts. We don't come complaining, we don't come asking, we come saying thank you. Thank you because you've been good when we were bad. You've been good all by yourself. And oh, tonight, God, we thank you for the Zion songs of the choir, and we ask you now to just shower your blessing in, just shower your spirit that you will be in our midst, that we'll continue to remember that you are the way, the truth, and the life. And we continue to lift you up, Master. We thank you, dear God. We just want to pause just to say thank you. We thank you for a voice to cry out thank you. We thank you now, Lord, and as we go forth in thy name, we help us to realize that without you, we can do nothing. And oh, Lord, if there might be someone in our midst who might not know you in the pardon of their sins, we ask you now to speak to their hearts now. Help them to realize that you are the giver of life. You are the sustainer of life. And oh, Lord, we'll be careful to give you the praise. For it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
In the month of June 1967, 30 years ago this month, a group of college students, led by a young seminarian known as Jack Mack, moved into Chicago's West Side with the encouragement and support of Monsignor John J. Eden, Director of Office of Urban Affairs and then pastor of Presentation Church. They started their work by visiting the community, walking around from house to house and just talking to people. They heard many problems facing the community, such as the garbage that was never picked up on time, or sometimes would go weeks without being picked up. As a result of that, they took garbage down to City Hall, and we got garbage picked up the next day. Playlots, a lack of playlots in the community, that the kids didn't have a decent place to play. A result of that, we put kids in a bus and took them to Mayor Dudley's neighborhood and played in his playlot. It took us 5 days and we got a playlot. As a result of all of this and talking to the people in the community, an issue arrived that was stronger and had a very negative tone to it, and that was housing and how the people had purchased their homes. Communicating with the people and going from door to door and listening to them, they came to the conclusion that something needed to be done, and it was. CBL was born. We'll hear from several people that were involved with CBL in a variety of ways. We'll start with Monsignor John J. Eden first.
Gee, I'm glad I came. I haven't had a standing ovation in years. I thought I would spend a few moments telling you about the very, very, very beginning of contract buyers, because some of you don't know the story. And I was a new pastor. The year was 1966. I was a new pastor. The problems of the people I felt were my problems. The parish was large, 42,000 people. And I felt all the people in the community were my responsibility. As I look back at those days, it was one of the finest things that Cardinal Cody could have ever done for me. I don't think he intended it that way, but it was a tremendous boost because it was the first time I had been in the civil rights movement for some time, and this was the first time that I had the privilege of living with black people and getting to know them, getting to know the depth of their spirituality. I was an arrogant priest. I felt that I was bringing God to the West Side. And after being there a very short time, I realized God was there in the lives of the people. And what I could do best was to serve them. I went to 6 seminaries in the area, 6 seminaries. I spoke to the rector and got them to select 10 seminarians from each of the seminaries to come into our neighborhood every Saturday. We called it Operation Saturation. They were bussed in. Each seminarian I assigned to one block and told him that that block was his parish. They were to get to know every person in that block, no matter what their religion, to discover their goodness and to learn if they had any difficulties or problems. The seminarians would return to the rectory around 4:30 in the afternoon, and we would debrief them and then follow up on their findings during the following week. Shortly after he had begun the visits, one man came to me and told me of the practice of the people having to pay to buy their homes on contract. He thought it was wrong and that people were being abused by this practice. I had heard about this method of home purchase, but knew little about it. I asked some knowledgeable friends in real estate and city politics about it and found out that it was the best kept secret in town. I was warned not to touch it because there were so many people involved who would cause trouble for me and for the parish and for the seminarians. They would cause great trouble because they were very powerful people, mean-spirited, and there was much money involved. I relayed this information to one of the young seminarians who spoke to me about this abuse, Jack McNamara. He told me that he wanted to do something about it. I advised him to study the problem. Jack McNamara, Mike Eakin, who's here tonight, Joe Putnick, researched the buying and the selling of the homes in our neighborhood. They and I were appalled by what we learned about the real estate practices, about the banks and the mortgage lenders. Then they called a meeting of some of the buyers involved. I'll never forget that night. There was silence. Nobody wanted to admit that they had been taken. It was then that Ruth Wells spoke up and told her story. I call her the Rosa Parks of Lawndale. The rest is history, which all of you know. For the next few years, each Wednesday night, about 300 people came to our church basement to testify and to learn what the seminarians and our competent volunteer lawyers were discovering. The fight was on, leading eventually to all of you renegotiating your contracts and getting real mortgages and saving our people about $6 million. And I think think that $6 million would be translated into about 25 million today. It is an extraordinary story. And I'd like all of you to get that Atlantic Monthly publication upstairs, which tells the whole story better than I did tonight. But it's an exciting story. It's an exciting story which I talked to Archbishop George about last week, and he was quite amazed. He had never heard about the Contract Buyers League. And I told him that in our church basement, every Wednesday night there are about 300 people, and he was quite impressed. And he said he identified Father Waltz right away, and he said, I have to get out to Presentation Parish and find out what's happening out there. So, Father Waltz, be on your guard. Thanks much.
Now we will hear from Mr. Sidney Sharif.
Let me start out by greeting all of you all with the greetings of peace, with the greetings of all of the prophets, from Adam through Muhammad, of Assalamu alaikum. That means peace be unto you. With the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, it's really an honor to stand here before you and just share with you some of the memories and some of the experiences that we had 30 years ago. The effort on the part of people brought about the renegotiation of over 400 contracts, which is really unheard of in the history of this country. Because what we kept hearing was, a contract is a contract, it's a deal, it's legal. Many people got hurt. The beauty of it, though, was that these people, unnamed people, just faces, that worked hard every day, went to the post office, went to Sears Roebuck, went to Spiegel's Mail Order House, worked every day, Campbell Soup Company, Continental Can Company, bakeries. All they want to do is just raise their families and live in a house and live in a nice neighborhood. So when they found out that, hey, we're playing by the rules, but we got some people here that don't care anything about the rules when it comes to simple fundamental fairness. As a result of that, over 4,000 people, these little people got together and said, we're going to see if we can't turn this thing around. I want to explain to you how the South Side and the West Side got together. Now, the South Side didn't come on the scene until the battle had been joined. I mean, the smoke was rising and something was kicking, because that's how we happened to get involved. I saw a couple of newspaper articles, you know, contract buyers, and I started reading. Then I started looking at my little contract, saw how much I paid for them, started putting two and two together. See, what you don't know can hurt you. And when I found out after a little knowledge came that I was getting hurt, I said, hey, let me go over here and talk to these folks on the West Side and see if we can't sit down and get together. So after we got past our primitive superstitions of each other and primitive fears of each other, we found out that we could work together with white folks. And that was a big hurdle. That was one of the hurdles that the Jesuit scholars ran into. You know, we're here now, and can we work with these black people? And the black people looking at them saying, what are you looking for? What's in it for you? Naturally suspicious. We overcame that, thank God. We got the idea to withhold money. You know, when you start putting people's feet to the fire, you get a reaction from them. Before you can do that, you get nothing. What are these people talking about? We picketed. We passed out flyers. We put things in the newspaper, eloquent stories about how things were not right and how things were just working against striving poor people. It didn't work. But when we began to hold that money back, everything came out from under the woodwork. We consequently were able to put in savings $100,000 a month when we decided we weren't going to pay our mortgage payments and our contract payments. Now, how many of you all, as we sit here today, would be willing to not make payments on your house knowing that there's a possibility you're going to be evicted? Raise your hand. I didn't think I did too many takers. This is what these courageous people faced. They knew that they were going to risk losing everything that they had if they didn't make it. But the law said, it was quite clear. And this is how we managed to get some attorneys in there, and actually they began to do things that they thought they would never do. They began to think a different way from how they had been thinking, and they began to sign on to what we had been saying. So they began to defend us in court, hoping to keep us from getting evicted while challenging some other things. But time was working against us, but at the same time, time was working with us. Every month, mind you, we were banking $100,000 a month. So in 10 months, how much money is that? $1 million. That is power. We found out about force, legal violence from Sheriff Joe Woods. You know, he began to block off the streets with armies of deputies. You all don't know anything about this, most of you all, because you're not old enough. But they cordoned off streets from 95th Street to 96th Street. You couldn't drive through there. And they had about 100 deputies on each side of the street, and they were shaking people out of houses just like you turn over a box of Cracker Jacks. That's what was happening in 1969. However, a lot of good came out of that. Most of the people who were in the struggle, if they chose to get evicted, and this was a choice that they made. This was a personal choice. They were not coerced. It was your personal choice. Are you going to stand and not pay these people no matter what, or are you going to pay them? That was their choice. Many people chose to stand and not pay one dime, and they didn't. They were evicted and subsequently went on and got better homes. Most of them did. I mean, their lives were just better as a result of that. And it was only through God's grace that it happened. We couldn't have planned it. You know, God plans and we plan, and He's the best of planners. All we knew was that we were not supposed to be walked on at that time. That's how we felt. So we stood fast. The upshot of it was most of us got bigger and better homes. That was a victory. Most people were able to realize about a $10,000 savings on those renegotiated contracts. That was a victory. There's a lot of things that happen when people are denied equal access to markets. And the housing market is one of the most important markets in America. And by us being denied equal access to that market, we were being impoverished. And to many degrees, these practices are still in place. They're subtle, but they're still there. Your dollar is still not worth the dollar that a Caucasian has in his hand. That's the system. That's the way it is. And nobody in here is to blame about it. It's something personal, but that's the way it is. There's an unbalance here, and we sought to strike a balance at that time, and we still need to strive for striking those balances today. Thank you all very much, and I hope God bless us. Assalamu alaikum.
Now we will hear from Mr. Thomas Sullivan.
It is truly a pleasure to be here tonight for this reunion, and I remember back in late 1968 when Jack McNamara first came to me, and I did not realize when he walked in my office that day that for the next 15 years I'd be working on this case. But it was a wonderful experience. And Jack asked me to make a few remarks about what CBL means to me. It meant a couple of things to me. First of all, the opportunity to work with some really great lawyers. Bob Ming, who is now dead, but who was the lead co-counsel in the case. Many of you knew Bob. And in my life, I've just met a few people who've been inspirational to me, and he's one of them. And I really miss Bob Ming every day of my life. The single most significant thing CBL meant to me was working with the people of the West and South Sides. and the inspiration that those people gave to the lawyers. It was just wonderful what we saw at those meetings on Wednesday nights, the presentation, and both the South and the West Side cases. What Sid said is correct. We ran into opposition from the sellers. They simply would not talk to us when we first brought this lawsuit. The South Side was particularly obnoxious, but they were all tough, and I remember very vividly the holdout. And what Sid also said is very interesting, and back at the time, it was a phenomenon that I had not experienced as a young lawyer, and that is the client taking a position based on principle that the lawyers couldn't justify based on the law as they knew it, and force the lawyers to rethink. And that's really what happened. It happened in the basic lawsuit, and it happened in the holdout. And the clients, you people, because of the principled position you took, forced us to go back and rethink what we were doing and the approach we were going to take, and we then were able to expand our thinking to accommodate some remedies for what the people wanted to do. And it was a grand experience for us because it was a growing experience for the lawyers to be pushed forward in their thinking and look for new horizons, because some people, most of whom had never gone to college, were telling us what the right thing to do was and asking us to come up with some legal remedies for what they thought was the correct thing to do. So CBL to me is a wonderful memory. I'm so privileged to have been a part of it, and I thank you all for allowing me that privilege. And I wish you all the best in the future. Thank you.
Next on the program, we have Ms. Bucola Maynard.
Well, I think and praise God tonight for being able to be here and to go through the experience that I went through with. But I thank God for Father Higgins, Ms. Ruth Well, and Jack. And all the lawyers and the students, I just thank and praise God. Because I purchased my house in '59, it was Times Realty. His name was Joseph Burton. So he went away when all that commotion was going on. He ran, and I had my money. So he stayed gone for 5 years. So he came back and he started threatening my tenants and telling them he's going to evict us. I said, well, I had no CBL. I wasn't worried, because I would listen to them. And he said, don't nobody sign nothing. So he called me down, going to renegotiate, and he told us I got some paper to sign. I said, I'm not signing nothing. He said, I still got some paper to sign. So my lawyer said, Bucola, be quiet. I said, I will not be quiet. I'm not signing nothing. So the lawyer said, let me see your paper that you want them to sign. He had borrowed $10,000 on my home, and he was going to make us pay that, and I owed him $8,000, and he went away and stayed 5 years, and see, that was $18,000. And so the lawyer said, no, they're not paying you nothing. They're going to pay you from now on for the $8,000 they owe, pay you $200 a month. And we don't give you anything else. And so that was my victory, because he was going to charge me all over again. But I'm listening to our lawyers and to Jack, to everybody who was in charge. I would listen to them. I said, I will not sign no papers. And so when he found out that I wasn't going to sign anything, the lawyer said, no, you got these girls, and we are 2 white guys, and these are 2 black girls. So no, we are not going to pay you no more money. We're always going to pay you $8,000. So my victory was 5 years $210 a month that I saved up. I didn't give it to him. So I thank and praise God tonight.
Now we will hear from Mr. Mark Splain.
I'm Mark Splain, and I was 19 years old in 1967, and I got a call from Jack McNamara. I was in Boston at the time, and I was a student, and Jack described a situation in Chicago with, at the time called the Presentation, or what was to be known as the Presentation Parish Community Organization Project. And it didn't take too long on the phone, and Jack had convinced me to hitchhike to Chicago, and I did in June, I guess, 30 years ago. First, I think what CBL meant to me and what it really was about was the fight. It was about the Wednesday night meetings, and it was definitely about the actions on Saturday, and the pickets, and really the people that came out, the contract buyers that came out consistently, and the courage that people demonstrated, the persistence, the good humor at times, the patience, the risk-taking, a lot of amazing people, and people that were willing to fight for what was right against odds that no one could calculate, and clearly on the surface, there was no expectation of how this thing could be won. From the very beginning, as it's already been said, this was a done deal. These were signed contracts, and it was really inspirational. And more than anything else, that's what excited me at the time and still excites me. I think the second thing is about CBL is a very simple lesson and incredibly important in the society in which we live, which is what CBL was about was breaking rules. And as Sydney has already said, we know how much power, in fact, will yield if it's always a question of being polite and making the articulate argument and piecing all the logic together. And I think that the creativity and the action, again, the risk-taking, and those things were an incredibly important lesson to me. My parents had worked hard to send me to good schools, but I don't think that there was any lesson I was going to learn in a school as quickly as I learned it in Lawndale in terms of what it was really about, in terms of when people were really up against it. And the third thing, which I know many people here feel strong about, is Jack McNamara. And Jack was the mentor for all of us, and nobody worked harder than Jack. And I want to thank Jack for everything he gave then and he continues to give now. So in closing, I just want to remind people of what we all know here, which is the spirit of CBL lives on. Again, I'm fortunate enough to work with young organizers and with leaders, whether it's in the strawberry fields in California, or we've got a big campaign going, or I was talking to Ed Sunshine last night, the nursing home workers in Miami, or poultry workers in the South. I think that the spirit of CBL lives on, and those people that are fortunate enough, like some of us were and continue to be part of that struggle, are very blessed, and I thank everyone here.
Now we will hear from Ms. Lavinia Bradshaw Dixon.
Good evening. My name is Lavinia Bradshaw Dixon. I came to testify and give honor to God, whose Son is Jesus Christ. I was blessed with a new mortgage. A new mortgage meant to me someone who is getting something for nothing. Sam Lane thought he was giving it to me for nothing, but I knew better when we talked to these other people. All right. And I knew that it was time for us to work. I worked hard. We worked hard. And I got the Contract Buyers League put on the market. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Mr. Peter Welch.
Thank you very, very much. And I'm one of the college students, along with Mark Spillane, and on behalf of all the other college students who aren't having a chance to greet you personally from here, I extend to you our gratitude for being part of your organization, and more importantly, thank you for letting us all be a part of your lives for the years that we were here. The question is, what does CBL mean to me? And you know, it really means a lot of things. As a young college student, it was my first time undertaking any kind of responsibility, whether it was leading one organization effort against one of the realtors, which is how we divided it up. It was an introduction to a whole new world, meeting people on the west side and on the south side. It was engaging in the adult world of newspapers, of downtown lawyers. It was the Chicago Title and Trust. It was, in many ways, inspirational seeing the Monsignor Regans and the Jack McNamara's and the Ruth Wellses and the Lucille Johnsons and the Sid Sharifs who were willing to take on an extraordinary fight. It was working with and getting to know the fellow students that we lived in a small apartment, 6 of us, or 12 of us, however many could fit in at any one time. It was taking pride in many of the achievements, and they were enormous, what it is that all of us working together accomplished. But as I went on, my attitude really and my orientation began to change, because as much as when I first came, I was excited about the newness of it as a young person would be, I began, as we got into the payment strike, to start asking myself the question in astonishment about where is it that the West Side people and the South Side people could summon the courage to put at risk their homes and their futures. As I began, even as a young person, to appreciate that this was not an idle decision, and the decisions that you were making were much different than the decisions we were making. I would at some point be going back to school. I would at some point be going on to law school. And as much as I admired people like Tom Sullivan, who made a commitment with their life, the choices that he and the rest of us made were fundamentally different than the choices that the CBL people made. And it required a kind of courage that I just didn't understand when I realized and began to appreciate the meaning of having a house at risk when you had little children at home and would be asking you and looking into your eyes when the sheriff arrived, where are we going to be tonight? And you did not have an answer. And I've really pondered that question over the years, because in some ways, as much as the accomplishments are something we can be proud of, and as much as we're all inspired by the leadership of any number of people that we can single out, the basic question that I never have able fully to be able to resolve is, where did that courage come from? And I think I'm beginning to understand that fundamentally that courage came from a decision that people who decided to join CBL made. And it was a decision that they were going to engage in the life that they had, that the problems that were theirs, whatever they may be, not ones that you chose, not ones that you wanted, but whether it was oppressive contracts, whether it was a disabled child, whether it was loss of a job, the choice and the fundamental choice that you had to make is really a choice that all of us in life have to make. And that is, do we engage those problems in a way where we choose hope over fear? Do we choose love and acceptance over rejection and apprehension? Do we choose to work together, or do we choose to walk alone? And what I think, as I try to come up with some understanding of where your courage came from, is that somehow, some way, you were able to make that choice for working together instead of walking alone, to engage life and to take on the problems, and to do that even if you had no clear idea, as none of us did, what the ultimate outcome would be. And if we did it only because that's the only way we wanted to live our life. And if I think back about what the lesson of CBL is for me, that's what it is. There's no guarantees, there's no assurances, but it's just the better way, where when we look over our shoulder at the years behind, we can say we walked that road together. I thank you on behalf of all of us who were honored to be part of the CBL struggle. Thank you.
And now we will have a brief few words from Jack McNamara.
All of us have grown up with the idea that the way you get something changed in our society is to get a prominent position in government or a prominent position in business or something like that. When it came to getting contracts renegotiated, the prominent people in government and business couldn't do a thing. The only thing that got those contracts renegotiated was the people of CBL, who picketed their realtors, went and told their neighbors what they were like, and then withheld the payments and faced real hardship and eviction and all the rest. And just as an example, we had the most prestigious law firms in the city representing the Contract Buyers League. The lawyers did wonderful things and accomplished a lot of things, but the lawyers couldn't deliver when it came to getting contracts renegotiated. Paul Simon, when he was lieutenant governor, came to the Contract Buyers League meeting and was very supportive, very generous, very kind. Paul Simon could not deliver when it came to getting contracts renegotiated. When we were trying to get the Attorney General of the United States to file a friend of the court brief in the Contract Buyers League lawsuits, the governor of another state tried over and over again to get Ramsey Clark in the final days of the Johnson administration to come in as a friend of the court. The governor of the other state, as hard as he tried, could not deliver in getting Ramsey Clark to come into the lawsuit. It was only when a delegation of contract buyers went to Washington and talked to the new people in the Nixon administration that John Mitchell came as a friend of the court in the Contract Buyers League lawsuit. But as powerful as John Mitchell might have been as a friend of the court in the Contract Buyers League lawsuits, he couldn't deliver when it came to getting contracts renegotiated either. The answer, or what CBL taught me, what CBL means to me, is what can happen and can only happen when people are working together and sticking together and getting the job done. Thank you.
On the 13th anniversary of its founding in 1967, the Contract Buyers League acclaims with profound respect Mr. Sam Lane, who openly acknowledged the injustice of his contract sales and renegotiated all his contracts according to the Contract Buyers League fair price formula. In the face of criticism, threats, and personal danger from other contract sellers, we would like to present this to Mr. Lane. Mr. Lane is, he's not here tonight. He's very old and ill, but we will make sure he gets this. And it's dated June 21st, 1997. The other will be presented to the Chicago province of the Society of Jesus. On the 13th anniversary of its founding in 1967, the Contract Buyers League expressed its deepest appreciation to the Chicago province of the Society of Jesus, who, in 1969, under the leadership of Reverend Robert F. Harvick, S.J., joined our struggle for the justice founded on faith by risking $100,000 for our appeal bond fund and leading the way for all the American Judas Providence to risk a total of $250,000 to enable the Contract Buyers League with its lawyers to argue to a favorable decision before the Supreme Court of Illinois, eliminating unjust provisions of the Illinois Forcible Entry and Detainer Act, dated June 21st, 1997.
I am honored on behalf of all the Jesuits of the Chicago province, particularly those who were active in the Contract Buyers Leagues over the years, to receive this, but I particularly receive it in memory of Father Bob Harbenek, probably one of the greatest Jesuits that I've ever known. And it was really his leadership, I think, that was instrumental in the Jesuits here, based here in Chicago, being strongly supportive of the Contract Buyers League and the work that it was doing. Our part was a small part. It's the part of many other people in this room that was really the major and important thing for the victory that was ultimately achieved. But I am very grateful and honored to receive this award in the name of my brother Jesuits. Thanks.
We would like to back up just a little bit to Ms. Ruth Wells, who was thought of in those days, Father Egan had already said it, that she was the Rosa Parks of Lawndale. And we would now have a few words from her.
I don't know how Rosa Parks felt, but I just felt like another contract buyer. And I got angry. And sometimes when you get angry, if you don't do the wrong thing, you will be determined to do it right, to do something right. I'm glad to be here this evening. I'm so grateful to see the sea of beautiful faces that have thought enough of us to come here and listen. In 1959, my husband and I bought a house on contract. And one of the things that we did was to get a lawyer first before we signed in the papers. But back then, it seemed to have been no way of escaping the way our society had set things up for black homeowners, or those that wanted to be homeowners. They had what they call a red line area district, and that was where any black was buying. That was red line, and meaning you didn't get a mortgage. You either bought on contract or you didn't buy. Now, contract is not that bad if you get the right lawyer to look it over before you sign it. You have your say and the seller have theirs. And you can read it over and see if there's anything in there that you don't like. You can always say to your lawyer, I'm not going to sign with this here. But that wasn't the case then. In my case, the seller paid $14,000 for the home that he sold me for $23,000. And then I paid $201 a month. I never missed a payment. Now, it's stipulated in the contract that if you paid down to a certain amount, you could then cross over and get a conventional mortgage. But when I went to get a conventional mortgage, I had another lawyer, and he was kind of like the first one. So the seller said that he would not allow me to get this mortgage, wouldn't sign papers, unless I pay him $1,500 more. And so I asked my lawyer, to give you an idea what kind of lawyer I had, I asked him, what is the $1,500 for? I knew I hadn't missed any payments. And he said he didn't know. And I wanted to know, why don't you know? You were my lawyer, you know, you're supposed to know. You know, I'm the one not supposed to know, but you were supposed to know. But anyway, when we talked to the seller, he said it was for insurance. So a group of us went down to his office. But the people that went with me, who was very supportive, one was Father Egan. And they stood back, and I had to do the talking. But in a way, that's part of what CBL means to me. You learn to talk for yourself. If you find something wrong, you're supposed to let them know, I know it's wrong. But anyway, I talked to him, and he said, by the way, I did quite a bit of praying about this, because no one knew how we were going to come out. So I prayed before I left home. And then anyway, I asked God to touch this man's heart. But when I got there and I was sitting at his desk and I asked him about the $1,500, and he had his secretary to bring the policy in where I could see it. And I said to him, I said, do you think we live on North Shore Drive? I said, because $1,500 insurance is not, I'm not going to pay that amount. Now, it's stipulated in the contract that we pay principal, interest, insurance, and taxes in with the monthly payment. So how did I get $1,500 in the rear? And I'm paying every month. So eventually he said that we'll just mark it off, the $1,500. And I had got ornery by then, and I told him I don't want it. So I refused to even sign the papers about insurance. But then from there, we went to, after they stipulated how much we were paying each month, what it was for. So there was no misunderstanding or lack of understanding where that house was concerned. After we paid down, by the way, $3,000 down. And then we were supposed to pay the other $20 within a certain amount of time. We was going to get on the mortgage at a certain amount of time. This is why he decided to add the $1,500, because I wanted to get on the mortgage. But all of that was taken care of later. Now I'm going to take you back a little ways to the first meeting of CBL when we was trying to get organized. This was the very first meeting. We went to this meeting at night in presentation basement, and there was about 8 or 10 people there. And Jack was the one, of course, knew how to do these things, so he explained to the little audience we had about what we was all about, and what we were trying to do, and and what he thought we could get. We had been cheated, and he thought we could get. We could actually recover from that. So after he finished, and he said, is there any questions or any of you would like to ask? And no one said anything. They didn't say a mumbling word. So then he came to me, and he said that, why don't you tell them about your plight with your contract? And I said, no, I don't talk in front, I've never talked in front of people like that. I said, I can't stand up there. And he kept after me and showing, oh, you can just go stand up and tell them you know the story. Tell them what happened to you. So I managed to get up, and I was sitting in a straight chair, and I walked around in back of the straight chair, and I leaned over on the chair for support. Now, young people at that time were saying I was being cool. I was being scared, I was not cool at all. But anyway, I explained what happened to me and the figures on my contract. And then afterwards, then everybody held a hand up. They wanted to talk. Now, what it was, they were afraid because Jack was white. And they feel, well, if a black person tell you, and she's in the same boat that they were, but they wasn't admitting it at the time. But when I told my story, then they knew they were in the same boat I was in. So that's what happened at the first meeting. And so after that, the meetings each Wednesday night kept growing larger and larger until we reached around 500 or so. But this went on for a while. Now, you might be asking, you did all this and you're telling us all these little details. Well, what was the accomplishment of all of this work that was done? You see, more than 400 contracts were renegotiated. That's one of the accomplishments. And then the average saving per family was $13,500. Now, in today's money market, that would be $55,000, Now, the total savings of all the renegotiated contracts was actually $6 million, but in today's market, that would be $25 million today. So, and how did we do it? Okay, meeting with the sellers, trying to talk the proper renegotiation, our formula, which was the right formula. We talked to them, they refused. We picketed their offices, they still refused. We visited their neighborhoods and rang their neighbor's doorbell, giving them a flyer with the information on it and tell them what a crook your neighbor is. And then came the payment strike. That didn't work. So what the payment strike consisted of, everybody paid themselves the same amount of money that they supposed to pay the seller each month, never missing a month. And then they would get a money order made payable to themselves, bring it to the office, and we would take it and put it in the safe deposit box. So no one actually was missing a payment, they just didn't pay the seller. So when we did this, that hurt quite a few people there that was depending on our hard-earned money to take care of their families. So this was one way we had of, should we say, kind of getting back a little bit, or recouping maybe. And then we holding the money, right? They're not paying any sellers, but we're keeping the money. Now came the eviction law. At that time, you couldn't raise a defense if you were bought on contract. They would set you out. They had a certain amount of days they could set you out if you missed one payment, which means you forfeited all the payments you had made already. In other words, these were people that's supposed to be helping us. I'm not talking about the sellers now. The lending institutions and the laws of the land, they forgot us. So this is what CBL was taking care of. So now at that time, after you couldn't raise a defense, the Jesuits put up an appeal bond in the amount of $250,000. So in case they put us in jail, we could get out. And okay, the sheriffs came, they set our people out. We were there, we set them back in, Had you asked any of us before this happened that would you go against the sheriff? They probably, are you crazy? No, I'm not gonna. But see, what CBL, I'm gonna have to put this in here. What CBL means to me is strength, togetherness, unity, determination. These are the things that was in these people's mind, including mine. But I will not go back. So this is what happened on the set-outs. That went for quite some time. And as I say, we were just as busy as the sheriffs were. They were setting them out and we set them back in. And but this is what it takes when you have a problem that you have faced and you don't know what to do as things come up in the mind, then you do that. So long as it's legal. Now, I'm not saying setting the people back in the house was legal, but they didn't arrest us. They did not arrest us. So, during that time, as I say, we couldn't raise the defense. You were on contract, cannot raise the defense. Special legislation, on the other hand, provided the sellers with an additional weapon to prevent the buyers from achieving justice. Under the Illinois Forcible Entry and Retainer Act, a contract buyer who missed the payment by whatever reason was liable for eviction within 45 days, as well as forfeit every payment that they had made. Now, we worked with, talked with people concerning these type laws, but as you heard one of our lawyers that worked with us saying there were things we could do that they could not do. I mean, they were, they're lawyers, so they have a certain status, and the law keeps them within that. But we could do things because we are not lawyers, and we did them. And we worked hard. Everybody was working hard, and everyone was actually determined to get the job done. I'm supposed to sit down in a minute. And as I said before, I've already answered the question of what CBL meant to me. It was confidence, building confidence in people who had none or who had confidence, didn't know how to display it. So they brought things out of me that I never would have known I could have done. You see, just like I'm standing here now, I was a little shaky when I got here because I had a little problem on the way here. But I finally made it anyway. But just like I stood that first night at the meeting, well, I stand tall now in a lot of areas, and I don't just mean my height. So I'd like to say thank you.
Now we will have Mr. Clyde Ross.
Good evening. I know you're hungry, so I'm not going to bore you, because everything that has been said probably should be said. But for those who live in Lawndale, I got news for you. There's been a drastic change been made in Lawndale for the last 15 years. The only thing that blacks control in Lawndale now is barbershops, funeral homes, and hairdressing places. Again, we have lost our power to our community. Better get up. We're going to find ourselves identical in the same situation that we was in before. We're too good. We sit around and let race after race get rich off of us. And we ain't prejudices as you think we are. We would shop at everybody's store but our own. And we would buy a dress at everybody's store but our own store. And when our neighborhood started going down, people said, look at those folks that go in their houses. Well, the money's gone, that's why. Let's see.
I just came back here, I told you a short story about the history of CBL, but this history would not be complete without Mr. John McNamara. Would like to honor him today. All the CBL members agreed to do this and thought that it was late coming. So we're asking him to come up on the stage. He always wants to stay in the background, but he deserves the front. To present to Mr. John McNamara. We honor him for his devotion, loyalty, tireless work to the CBL and our community of Lawndale. The only reward of virtue is virtue. The only way to have a friend is to be one. You have been a true and trusted friend to us all. June 21st, 1997.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very much.
We have one for Monsignor Egan, too.
Monsignor Egan, would you please come up? Monsignor Egan?
Yeah, but very good. Oh,
You can start reading.
This award is for the symbol of congratulations and respect for your dedication. Contract by Father Monsignor Egan.
This award is a symbol of our gratitude and respect for your dedication. The people here are the ones who were dedicated. I want to echo what Jack said. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. It means a lot to me.
We've all had our down times, but when we come together in the Lord, it all gets a whole lot better. So let's sing together, Amazing Grace.
Our final speaker is Mike Geekin. Mike grew up in Our Lady of Angels Parish on Chicago's West Side. He graduated from St. Ignatius High School in 1967, and for the last 25 years has been organizing with the Industrial Areas Foundation on the East Coast. Mike.
In preparing for this morning, I found it strange to think about giving a talk to people I've listened to and talked with for most of my life, some of you, as well as a group I've just met for the first time. So I tried to imagine myself back in the apartment in Lawndale or in the Randolph apartment in Hyde Park a few years later, or in Jimmy's Bar, and just to think through and think out loud about some of the issues that came up as I did that. For those I'm only seeing for the first time, let me give a little history so that I'm talking to you too, and you can talk back when we're finished. The first Jack I met was Jack Egan, and I first heard Jack Egan's name in the late 1950s when my mother came home from Mass one morning and said that she had experienced the most amazing thing, a wonderful sermon from a new young priest who had come to the parish. Like the young boy in Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt, who asked his father, "What's a priest?" I asked my mother, "What's a wonderful sermon?" Jack Egan and I were both there that terrible day in 1958 when the parish school caught fire and 95 children and sisters died. And then we met again 10 years later, 30 years ago, when I read about something called CBL in I think, the Sun-Times on Sunday morning, and saw Ward Gorey's name. I remember reading Ward Gorey's name. And Ward was going to Yale, or had been to Yale, and that's where I was going to go too. So I was attracted by that and by what CBL was doing and by the wages and benefits package, and signed on for the better part of 3 summers. More than 20 years ago, when I became an organizer with the IAF, I found myself once again working for Jack Egan as a member of our board and founder of our network and lifelong supporter of Ed Chambers and those of us who've built the IAF efforts around the country. So I've been listening to his voice almost all of my life, as have many of us here today, as has this entire city. And by now, from him and others, I've heard hundreds of wonderful sermons in churches of all kinds. Just as the phrase wonderful sermon meant little to me, the words organization and leader, the words power and organizer, the words strategy and struggle, the words enemy and ally, even the words church and democracy, either meant too little to me or connoted different things until I began to meet Jack McNamara and Ruth Wells and Clyde Ross and Mark Splain and Joe Putnick, until the hundreds of hours of brain-numbing title searches, until tense pickets of savings and loans, until stirring moments in action and meetings, until bricks came through my car window one evening and midnight negotiations on dark playgrounds, all of which took place 30 years ago. Until then, many of the words seemed disconnected and abstract. Until then, I could write them and speak them, even argue about them, but they didn't live. Or if they lived, they were stiff and severe, self-serving, idols. I'm going to quote Yaroslav Pelikan. I got on Jack McNamara a couple weeks ago because he talked about Brueggemann. So I'm countering with Yaroslav Pelikan, who's a religious historian who I actually met when I was 6 years old, riding along with my uncle in a livery funeral car in Chicago. He was in Chicago then. He would do Lutheran funerals, and my uncle would take me along to talk about the Cubs and go out to lunch with, so they were bored in tears. And Yaroslav Pelikan would be with us sometimes. An idol, Pelikan said, purports to be the embodiment of that which it represents, but directs us to itself rather than beyond itself. The organization of the Cook County Regular Democratic Party, the organization I knew a little about and read about and experienced through my father's life, was an idol, as the Democratic and Republican parties are today. Most leaders then and now were either not leaders at all or idols. And power either had little meaning to me or negative meaning. The power of the party, the power of organized crime, the power, and I'll be a little careful here, I guess, the power of the religious idol. People and institutions purporting to embody values and beliefs, but directing us to themselves, not beyond themselves, and often acting against us and those we cared about. In the 30 years since the founding of CBL, the idols have all gotten better at purporting to embody values and authority, and in using them against and over people. And these idols work feverishly to direct us to themselves. They have pundits and pollsters and PR people and spin doctors and spokespeople and analysts and think tanks and whole departments and institutes and so-called universities. Those who talk best about the idols or who write about the idols or who do the bidding of the idols become idols themselves. So it goes. What CBL gave us, was an image, a picture. An authentic image, said Pelikan, is what it represents. It's a simple thought, simple but difficult. We all know just how difficult now that we have struggled to be parents and spouses, workers and leaders, teachers and priests. But CBL was what it represented itself to be. And an image bids us to look at it, but through it and beyond it, to that living reality of which it is an embodiment. That's what CBL did for me, for many of us, I think. We were invited to look at it by Jack, by Ruth or Clyde, by friends in Cincinnati, or neighbors in Lawndale, by the Chicago Sun-Times, or the Atlantic Monthly, but also through it and beyond it, at a living reality that it embodied. What was that living reality? And was that living reality an image of what people try to call social justice? It's difficult for me to describe all of this in words. As I think about it and as I wrote about it, my own words seem pretty thin and abstract to describe the living reality of CBL. So thank God we're doing it here today, 30 years later, in the presence of many of the people who were CBL then and now. When Jack called me 2 months ago or so and said he wanted to have a reunion of the CBL team, I didn't pause a minute, didn't have to think about it, didn't have to wonder about it, didn't have to say, was I too busy? Or I knew immediately it's a reunion I wanted to come to. And I think that's the reaction of many of the people who Jack called. And I'm not a big reunion guy. But this is one I wouldn't miss. One part of the heart of the living reality of CBL is the set of relationships that preceded the organization in Cincinnati and Chicago and Lawndale and elsewhere, that came together during the CBL experience, and that continued long after the last meeting and settlement. These relationships crossed race and class, involved the very religious and the not so religious and the non-religious, and forced all of us involved out of our ruts. We all run along in our ruts. Racial ruts, denominational ruts, neighborhood ruts, professional ruts. And we rarely get the opportunity, we rarely find the place and space to be who we are, maybe the best of who we are, but also transcend those ruts and to challenge and be challenged in different ways. With little care and feeding, these public relationships live and breathe 30 years later. A second part of the living reality is that we were all part, some of us minor players, but still part, of creating something new. CBL didn't come out of some catechism or manual or university planning department. It came out of the wits and guts, the faith and persistence of contract buyers and priests and seminarians and staff. And it came out of the reaction and resistance, the hatred and social violence of contract sellers and financial institutions, of political fixers and racial excluders. It was a new thing, fresh and loud and fluid, and the act of co-founding, co-creating, co-generating in public life as in private life is an unforgettable experience. Compare it to all the times you tried to revive a dead committee or moribund structure. This feeling of building something new was made such an impression on me that I repeated it a few times in East Brooklyn and Philadelphia and Wilmington and Washington. And it feels as good each of those times, felt as good each of those times as it felt in CBL. A third part of that living reality was a different image of the church. A church that existed in dark playgrounds, on picket lines on Saturday morning, in the sixth rung of hell at the Chicago Title and Trust offices. A church that lived far beyond the walls of Our Lady of Presentation Sanctuary. This church didn't direct us to a building or to a single doctrine or to real Catholics, so-called real Catholics. It urged us past its immediate self and beyond itself to a wider range of God's people, to the mess and muddle of the public arena, to the bloody battlefield of politics. And it risked and leveraged what power and authority it had on behalf of others. It spent itself rather than hoarding its treasure. A fourth part of that living reality is that it fought, it acted. Yes, people thought, yes, people prayed, yes, people debated, yes, people planned, but lots of people do that. It did more than that and was more than that. It listened to people like Ruth Wells and heard about the reproach of contract selling and was willing to try to fight to rid the city of that reproach, which meant it had to act. Not in place of all the great leaders of Lawndale, not on their behalf, but with them, beside them, in support of them. How many times have we fought, really publicly, in the public arena? I was doing a training session last Saturday in Washington, D.C., in the church basement with about 50 of our leaders there from all neighborhoods in Washington. And I asked them how many of them had been in a big public fight in the last 10 years. And 6 raised their hand, 6 out of 50. And my guess that's about normal. We're kind of fight poor, I think, in our lives in public society. Today there's a new fad too called civil society. I'm sure some of you have heard about it, where, and the new cliche, I guess it's getting a little old, called public-private partnerships. And there's a new theory that we're really all in this together, and if we just find all the good instincts in people, they'll all come together and we'll all cooperate, the world will be a better place. All through my life as an organizer, beginning 30 years ago with CBL, I've run across a squad after squad of contract sellers. The same people willing to sell homes on contract in Lawndale in the 60s, willing to deny people mortgages, willing to panic white ethnic people like my parents from OLA, are today willing to deny welfare recipients living wage jobs, willing to displace low-rent workers with workfare participants, willing to panic people from temp job to temp job. The same assault we saw in 1967 is on today on poor families, but also maybe more intensively on those like the contract buyers of the 50s and 60s and the working poor, on those trying to lift themselves out of poverty. And just as the political apparatus cooperated in that attack and profited from it then, my father died never having paid off his third mortgage, having been panicked from place to place. So today there are people being sold jobs on contract, schools on contract, healthcare on contract in every city we work in, with the blessing of the Powells and often the neutrality or complicity of the organized church. But at CBL, we saw an image of a church that fought. These pictures of different people in the relationship of building something new, of local church willing to leverage itself, of strategy and struggle, form for me the image of what many call social justice. For social justice can become an idol too: bumper stickers, dead committees, backwater departments, a form of appeasement. The images of the CBL years, in the larger context of the images of the civil rights movement, form for many of us the backdrop for our decisions to organize or teach or be lawyers, to try to do in different ways more of this kind of work. And they mixed in my life with lessons of and guidance provided by my colleagues in the IAF, Ed Chambers and Arnie Graff and Stephen Roberson, to give me the confidence to organize and the outline of the picture of what we were trying to create. Jack told me there's been some talk of reviving CBL. I found that a little puzzling. This work didn't really start in 1967 and didn't end with the last meeting of CBL. I saw a quote by Andrew Lytle just the other day. Andrew Lytle was the former editor of the Sewanee Review. He died a little while ago. And he said, "If we dismiss the past as dead and not as a country of the living, which our eyes are unable to see, then we are likely to become servile. Living as we will be in a lesser sense of ourselves, lacking that fuller knowledge which only the past can give, it will be so easy to submit to pressure and to receive what is already ours as a boon from authority." I like that quote, I don't know. Living as we will be in a lesser sense of ourselves. The CBL experience gave us all a deeper sense of ourselves, made us less likely to become servile, gave us that fuller knowledge that only the past can give. That's why we don't need plaques or mayoral proclamations to verify the value and meaning of our common experience. William Faulkner said, I thought of Dave Quammen when I remember this, the past is not dead, it's not even past. CBL is not dead, it's not even past. It lives in our hearts and always will. It flickers in our mind's eye and always will. It connects us to a tradition, a living faith that we have all played a part in and that will continue long after the last of us is gone.